There is something quietly unsettling about standing in the heart of a major capital city and realizing that beneath the pavement, beneath the traffic, beneath the modern facades and polished sidewalks, there are streets that no longer belong to the present, not ruins in the romantic sense, not ancient relics fenced off for tourists, but complete streets once used by ordinary people, now sealed below the surface of cities that claim continuous histories. In places like London, Rome, Paris, and Istanbul, excavations have repeatedly revealed roads, storefronts, drainage systems, and corridors buried several meters below modern ground level. What strikes me is not merely their existence, but their completeness. These are not fragments scattered by time. They are organized environments, aligned and structured, as though the city once existed at a lower elevation and then simply shifted upward. The first time I saw images of an intact underground street, cobblestones still laid in deliberate geometry, doorways opening into shadow, I did not feel shock. I felt a slow tension forming, because streets are not decorative elements. They are functional arteries. They exist only where movement, trade, and daily life require them. And if entire streets now lie beneath our capitals, then at some point the surface of history must have moved. Cities rarely erase themselves cleanly, they accumulate, and sometimes accumulation becomes burial. Official explanations are not inherently implausible. Urban growth, we are told, often involves raising street levels to address flooding, sanitation, or infrastructure expansion. Over centuries, ground levels can rise gradually as debris, rebuilding, and modernization layer upon earlier foundations. In many cases, this is true. Yet, what complicates the narrative is the scale and coherence of what lies beneath. When excavations reveal not isolated basements, but entire street grids, aligned sidewalks, and intact commercial facades, the transformation appears less gradual and more decisive. Gradual change tends to leave irregular patterns. What we often see instead are level, uniform layers separating two distinct urban phases. In London, for example, sections of Roman and medieval streets remain preserved beneath later construction. In Rome, entire districts rest atop earlier, fully structured urban networks. In Istanbul, Byzantine foundations continue beneath Ottoman and modern expansions. These examples are historically acknowledged, and yet the emphasis in public memory remains on continuity rather than replacement. What interests me is not the existence of older layers that is expected in ancient capitals, but how little attention is paid to the transitions between them. When one functioning street becomes another street above it, the moment of change must have been significant. Streets do not simply fade, they are abandoned, redefined, or covered. History records rulers, wars, and treaties. It rarely records the quiet logistical decisions that reshape the ground beneath daily life, and perhaps that is where the deeper story resides. If we consider what it means to bury a street, the scale becomes difficult to ignore. A single block contains not only paving stones, but drainage systems, storefront thresholds, and carefully graded surfaces designed for movement. To cover such an environment requires more than incidental debris. It demands intention, material, and coordination. In several capitals, the vertical distance between successive street levels measures several meters. That represents an immense volume of earth and fill. It suggests organized labor and a collective decision that building above was more practical than dismantling below. Such a decision would not have been casual. What I find most compelling is the preservation. Buried streets often remain in surprisingly stable condition. Cobblestones stay aligned, foundations remain upright. This kind of preservation typically occurs when spaces are sealed rather than eroded slowly. It implies that the transition from one level to the next may have happened within a relatively compressed period. Of course, cities face crises, floods, fires, collapses that can accelerate rebuilding. Yet, when similar patterns appear across multiple capitals with different climates and histories, a broader rhythm becomes visible. Urban centers, it seems, do not merely expand outward. At times, they rebuild vertically, And vertical rebuilding leaves layers. When we walk through a capital city today, we experience only the latest adjustment. Beneath it, older adjustments remain, silent but structured, like pages in a book that was never entirely rewritten. A street is not just stone, it is memory embedded in alignment. It reflects patterns of commerce, social life, and movement. When a street is buried, its memory is not erased, it is archived. In Rome, archaeologists routinely uncover older roads directly beneath modern ones, often following nearly identical trajectories. This suggests that the logic of movement endures, even when surfaces change. In Paris, subterranean corridors reveal former pathways integrated into later infrastructure. In Istanbul, Byzantine road systems echo faintly beneath Ottoman streets. What emerges is not chaos, but continuity through transformation. Capitals, more than smaller towns, carry the weight of accumulated epochs. They do not start over easily. They adjust, layer by layer. Personally, I find this deeply human. It mirrors how societies handle disruption. Rather than erase the past completely, they build upon it, sometimes quite literally. The result is a city that appears unified above ground, yet contains multiple histories beneath it. This perspective shifts the narrative from mystery to maturity. Underground streets are not anomalies. They are evidence that cities endure long enough to change their own foundations. And endurance, more than expansion, defines a capital. What often goes unnoticed is how smoothly these transitions are absorbed into official timelines. A city is said to have been modernized or rebuilt, yet the mechanics of that rebuilding rarely receive sustained attention. The focus remains on the visible outcome, not the layered process. In some capitals, underground streets are treated as archaeological curiosities, attractions that confirm antiquity. Yet, the existence of entire functional environments beneath active ones suggests something more dynamic than simple aging. It suggests phases of redefinition, moments when the practical surface of the city shifted. I have walked through underground sections of preserved streets in Rome and felt an odd familiarity. The proportions, the alignment, the scale, they do not feel primitive. They feel deliberate. It is easy to forget that the present layer may one day be treated the same way. Another surface, resting atop something older. Continuity is comforting. It suggests steady progress, but continuity can also obscure rupture. When rebuilding happens efficiently enough, the break becomes invisible. What remains is a seamless narrative layered over a decisive change. Perhaps the true character of a capital lies not in its monuments, but in its layers, each one representing a moment when the city adapted rather than disappeared. The underground streets beneath major capitals do not demand dramatic conclusions. They do not insist on hidden histories or forgotten civilizations. What they invite instead is a shift in perspective. If entire road networks can move beneath our feet without altering the identity of a city, then history may be less about beginnings and more about transitions. Capitals endure because they absorb change. They survive not by remaining static, but by reconfiguring themselves when necessary. And when I consider these buried streets, I do not imagine secrets. I imagine resilience. I imagine generations deciding, consciously or not, that rebuilding upward was preferable to dismantling what already existed. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson beneath our capitals, that cities, like societies, carry their past within them even when they no longer walk upon it. And if we look carefully, we may begin to see not just architecture, but time, layered, patient, and still present beneath the surface of what we call modern life.